So recently, I've been getting a lot of questions about getting into guns, what people can do to get prepared. A lot of family, a lot of friends have been reaching out to me, and it sounds like one of the good things with everything going on this year, with pandemic and rioting and things like that. It's got people realizing that they need to be more self-sufficient. So I actually took a vote recently on my Instagram, and we got 100% response saying that you guys would like me to make some videos, kind of sharing some of my knowledge in this topic. And some of you may not know me. My name is Brendan. I spent about 10 years in law enforcement doing a number of different things. I was an intern for a period of time where I'd go on ride-alongs and take reports and do training and things like that. And I was a community service officer for a period of that time and a dispatcher. And then I was a police officer for about 4.5 years. I spent about a year going through a police academy. I did patrol, I did SWAT, I did dive rescue team as well. And so I got a little bit of experience. I worked for 4 different agencies in 2 different states, and there's a lot of lessons to be had there and a lot of things that I learned there that I think I can kind of pass along to you guys. So that's a little bit about me and my background. I mean, I've been shooting for probably 15 years now, and I've been carrying a gun daily for since probably 2012. So for about 8 years, I've been carrying a gun. So I know a little bit about this kind of stuff, and I hope to be able to share that with you guys. So for this first video, my kind of goal is to introduce myself so that you guys know who I am, and to talk a little bit about what I hope to accomplish. So my goal with making this video is to better our community. To share the bit of knowledge that I have with you guys so that you can kind of learn from my mistakes and learn from the things that I've experienced in the past. So, and hopefully we can achieve that. And maybe I can also educate some of you guys when it comes to this stuff, or mindset or philosophy, strategy when it comes to dealing with different types of situations. That's probably the biggest thing for me, the thing that I'm strongest at. I'm not the best shooter out there. I'm not the most expert tactician out there by any means. But I think I've got a good grasp of when to use force, when to intervene, maybe when not to intervene as well. What decision making might be appropriate or not in a given situation, and kind of being as reasonable as possible, because I think that's probably the hardest thing for people to grasp, is judgment calls, when you should or shouldn't do something. So hopefully I can accomplish that for you guys. But for the rest of this video, what I want to talk about is why do we carry, a little bit about rights as well, and maybe at the end what to expect from my next videos that I'm going to make. So why do we carry a gun? Why is it necessary to be prepared? Well, as you guys can see, there's been situations that have come to light as of recent that are widespread, where people are realizing the police aren't going to be able to help you. They're not going to be able to get to that part of town. They may not be able to respond to your emergency. You're kind of on your own, and that's something as a cop, what I was taught was you've got to be able to handle the situation as it is. You've got to be prepared, equipped, willing, both mentally with your knowledge, but also with being smart and using good judgment to handle whatever situation comes your way. So there's an awesome kind of quote that I've heard recently, and I don't remember who said it, but basically it's, no one is coming to help you, it's up to you. It's up to you to solve the problem, more or less something like that. And that is something I really want people to kind of take to heart and realize that police are responders. They come after the fact, after something bad has happened. 99.99% of the time, they're not going to be there when something bad happens. They're going to show up to the scene after somebody has called them. That's why it's really important for you to be prepared. It's also your responsibility. The idea of freedom is predicated on the idea of individual responsibility. And so if you don't want to take responsibility for your safety, for your body in terms of medical decision making and things like that, or being able to provide for yourself, then you're not free. You're dependent on other people. You're a slave to the system. So freedom is the whole idea is that you're self-sufficient and you're responsible for yourself, and you take ownership of yourself and you and all of your decisions. So that's kind of the idea, the whole premise there. And it's also, third thing here, built on the principle that everybody has a right to self-preservation. It's in the Declaration of Independence, it's in the Constitution. You have a right to preserve your own life, and you have a right to life. And anybody that infringes upon that, you have the right to defend yourself in that situation. Any tyrant that comes your way, be it an individual criminal or a local or foreign government. So whoever it is that's trying to infringe on your right to life, you have the right to defend yourself, and that's kind of the whole idea. And that's kind of like a very down and dirty, very basic, not complete by any means, and not really going into depth explanation of the idea of why we would be defenders, why we would carry a gun, why we would be prepared. Now I want to get into rights. So right is something I think a lot of people don't understand what a right even is. And then I want to talk about what your rights are in terms of like the Second Amendment. So what a right is something you're entitled to. It's something that you don't need permission for. If you need permission, if you need a license, if you need a permit, if you need to pay a tax on it, that thing isn't a right. At least the government doesn't recognize it as a right. That's a privilege. A right is something you don't need permission for, that they can't take away from you. And one of the things we're taught in school, which is 100% incorrect, is that your rights have reasonable limitations. Well, then they're not rights if they can be limited. If they can be limited and restricted and regulated, that's a privilege. That is not a right. A right is something that cannot be touched. It is something inherent to you. It does not come to you at a certain age. It says it in the Declaration of Independence, as well in the Constitution. It describes rights, and you're endowed by your Creator with inalienable rights. So these are rights that cannot be taken from you. The only exception I can see to that is when you've committed a crime and you are serving a sentence. You are imprisoned, and you are essentially a slave at that point, paying your debt to society or to an individual or whoever it is. That's the only time I can see that, and that goes into the Fifth Amendment, where you have to have due process. You have to have probable cause in order to have due process, and it has to be a justified arrest on you, more or less. So in order for any of your rights to be restricted, and it's only for the time that you're serving a sentence. Now, a lot of people are probably like, well, that's not exactly, a lot of you are probably thinking in your head, that's not exactly how things are. You're 100% right, because right now we don't really have rights. The government does not recognize them as rights. The government recognizes them as privileges, and you're conditioned to believe that they're privileges, accept that they're privileges, and feel very strongly about that so that they can take them away from you. So, what does the Second Amendment say? The Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So that first portion, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, people get confused on that. What that is that's them articulating why the right is in place. That's not the right itself that they're describing. That's why the right is in place. It's a justification. It's actually called a justification clause. They're explaining why they're putting this right in the Constitution. And it's because a well-regulated militia, at that time, well-regulated means a trained, an equipped, a prepared, a well-oiled. It doesn't mean government regulations. It means something that is taken care of. And a militia is a group of citizenry that is ready to fight a war. So it is so it's a group of citizens that are ready to fight a war. Being necessary to the security of a free state is kind of back to that principle that if you're interested in preserving your freedom, you have to preserve it. You can't expect anybody else to preserve it for you. So individual or collective responsibility in order to preserve freedom. So it is basically saying that in order for you to remain free, every man, woman, and child who is able to fight needs to be equipped, prepared, and trained to fight at a moment's notice that anybody who would infringe on their rights. That's essentially what that justification is saying. And it's talking specifically about arms. So the right of the people, so the right rests with the people. It doesn't say the right of the militia, the right of the government, however people want to twist it. It says the right of the people, so the right belongs with the people, the citizenry that are subject to the Constitution or fall under the Constitution's jurisdiction. In reality, the Constitution, as a side note, is a document that recognizes these rights. It does not grant us rights. It recognizes that every human being on earth has these rights, and it only has the authority to affect the United States, and it restricts the United States government from infringing on these rights and says, government, your job is to protect these rights. And they're actually sworn to protect them, but that's 100% not what happens. It's actually exactly the opposite that what happens in reality with our government. So that being said, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So keep and bear, that means to own and possess. Arms is means of war. It literally means any means of war, means of fighting, weapons of offense and armor for defense. So it doesn't mean guns, and it certainly doesn't mean hunting. It's talking specifically about fighting, combat. That's what it's talking specifically about. Just the meaning of the word arms infers battle. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say some arms. It doesn't say, guns longer than 16 inches. It doesn't say, but not explosives. Literally everything. Tanks, attack helicopters, machine guns, grenade launchers, mines, body armor, certain types of camouflage, night vision, thermal technology, information as well, tactical information, how to clear rooms, how to shoot a pistol, how to do all of this stuff, communication equipment, lasers as well, just anything that a modern-day military would use equipment-wise is what that is inferring. We need to be ready to fight. We need to be prepared like a regular infantry. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So shall, that word right there is actually very, very important because it doesn't allow the government any discretion. And what I mean by that is under some laws they say may. And may means the government could or could not. You kind of have some discretion in there. Shall means they absolutely cannot. They are absolutely restricted from infringing. Now, infringing is an interesting word because we really don't use that word these days, but what it means, other words that have a similar meaning are words like a limitation, a restriction. So anything that restricts your ability to have any means of war, any weapons of war, the government is not allowed to put that law into place. They're not allowed to take that action. They're restricted from keeping you from bearing or keeping any means of war. So essentially the Second Amendment is a ban, is a law, is a restriction on the government, saying the government cannot make laws restricting any citizen's ability to carry and own and possess any weapons of war or armor for defense, anything that falls in that category. And that's really what that means. And some people are shocked by that, and I would have no doubt that the majority of our society is shocked by that because we're programmed by media, which is kind of the PSYOP branch of deep state and the government. And there's kind of a lot to go in there, but you're programmed by media and you're indoctrinated by the public school system, which is controlled by government and people with agendas to distort information and teach you things that aren't true. So, and I know this because my mom was in teaching for 30 some odd years or whatever, and she knows the system very well and knows what's taught in schools, and is in complete agreement that it is not education. It's indoctrination. It's telling you what to think and programming kids rather than teaching them how to think and presenting information in a neutral way. So all of that being said, that's kind of over, why we carry. We carry because we have an absolute right to, we have a moral duty to. It is our responsibility, no one else's responsibility to protect our lives. It's actually, in law, a lot of cops think they're obligated to save lives. There's actually case law right now that says the opposite, and I completely disagree with that case law, but there's actually case law that says the opposite. It says that officers are not legally bound to save your life if the time came. Now, all that means is it's not a crime for them. It doesn't mean they won't get fired or punished or sued. It just means they're saying it's not necessarily a crime, at least in that area that is affected by that case law, which I believe that came out of Florida. But it is your responsibility. It is your moral duty. And anybody who is interested in preserving the freedoms that we have, which we do have these freedoms, we do have these rights, regardless of whether the government recognizes them. But 100% the government does not recognize them as true rights. They recognize them as privileges, unfortunately. So, and there's actually case law, I can go on and on about this. There's actually case law that says any law that violates the Constitution is null and void. Therefore, things like the Hughes Amendment and the NFA don't really exist. And that is what I believe. However, you also got to understand your area of operations. And we operate in an area that is where everybody, our government, believes that that is valid and in effect because somebody wrote it into law somewhere, and because it exists in law, it's valid. Remember this, legality and morality are two different things. Just because something's legal does not mean that it's constitutional or morally right or morally justified. Something that is morally justified could be completely illegal. And there's plenty of examples of that throughout history that we can, go back and look at. So anyways, that's kind of my spiel on what we're getting into, what I hope to do with these videos. And I appreciate it if you guys have been watching this long, because we're, 17 minutes into the video as of now. But what I hope to do is talk about the process for getting a gun, what kind of stuff you should look for, where you should start with that, how to start getting prepared, what equipment you might need, how to build up. We'll talk about, equipment as far as how I like to set up a defensive pistol, how I like to set up a defensive, rifle or AR-15 or long gun. We'll talk about tactics, and we'll talk about a lot of decision-making stuff and how context is very important. We'll also talk about how being stoic and emotionally detached from situations and acting based on facts and information is extremely important. In my job today that I do, there's a lot of that where we jump to conclusions. We get excited about something, we jump to a conclusion without getting the facts. We end up acting on it, and we end up making the situation a lot worse. And you actually see that very common within our current government. They tend to have a lot of knee-jerk reactions to things, in conjunction with having hidden agendas as well. But so I hope to kind of get into that stuff in the future here, and the next video that I'm going to do is probably going to be on purchasing a pistol, what to get, where you should start with being prepared as far as defending your family and your home and things like that, and then we'll kind of go from there. And I really hope that these videos can help you guys out and make everybody here better and bring us together as a community. If there's one thing I hate, it's how much division there is in the community and how many people attack each other. I may like Block and somebody else may like SIG. I don't feel strongly about that, where if you like SIG, you're the worst person ever. I may do a reload a certain way and you do it differently, or I may have a certain philosophy on something and you have a different philosophy. We shouldn't hate each other. We shouldn't be divided because of that. And we're in a society of extremes right now, where you're either extremely this way or extremely that way. And it's really important for us to be as neutral, as stoic, and as intellectually honest as possible with these things. And also not turn against each other so easily and destroy our own community. It is especially the gun community is very cannibalistic. We definitely eat our own, we definitely eat our young, and they just destroy each other, especially shaming each other for stupid things like people not being able to afford the nicest gun. Dumbest thing in the world that people shame each other for that, and it's really tragic to see, because in a time like this, it's extremely important for us to be together as a community. So That's all I got for right now. I hope to upload some more videos soon. But for now, take care, guys, and God bless.